Okay, just to recap then, because my other video was shut off. What I wanted to show you was how different applications are triggered by a certain activities in the phone. So, for example, here UpgradeSys is zero data and it's off. Okay, and here in apps for all apps, Launcher3, let's hit on it. It's zero data and it's off. Launcher3 is the home screen application for this phone. I cannot disable it, and I cannot get rid of it or remove it from the computer. I cannot, or phone. I can't disable it, and I cannot remove it. Now, I turned it off, and I'm using another home screen application. But this application still engages, still stops, or starts automatically on its own. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go to here or whatever, just to refresh. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my radio, so I'm taking it off airplane mode, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to show you. So here I've moved down, and here's upgrade system, and it's at 92, no cache, 92 kilobytes, and it's running. So also you'll notice that Launcher has 28.52 kilobytes of cache, and it has 60 kilobytes of data that have been populated the application. So I'm going to clear this now. And this happens all the time. First upgrade comes up and populates with data from somewhere. Somewhere upgrade system gets data from somewhere, and then something feeds launcher application as well. First upgrade it is triggered, and then launcher is triggered whenever I turn the radio on. So I'm just going to clear this, clear it, and then stop it. Okay, it's cleared and stopped, and then I'm coming down to, you'll notice I'm pausing it because I don't want to waste your time with scrolling. I did that in the other video, and it's annoying. So anyways, here's upgrade system, so I'm going to clear it. 0, and we'll stop it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave here. I'm going to go over to whatever, disabled, and now I'm going to, airplane mode is back on. Now let's go back, and we'll scroll quickly down to UpgradeSys. It should populate. Oh, there, 92. So UpgradeSys populated with 92 kilobytes. Let's go look down at Launcher. It did not populate. So when I turn the radio on and I stop airplane mode, Launcher and upgrade system are both populated with data. When I turn airplane mode off, Launcher is not affected, only upgrade system is affected. Also, Launcher is affected by Print Spool. By turning Print Spool on and off, Launcher is triggered. So Print Spool activity triggers Launcher as well. I'll show you. Okay, I'll show you that. So now we have Launcher3. We'll go into disabled. Print Spooler is disabled. I will enable it. It's got 0 data and it's got 0 cache. I enabled it. We'll go back here. We'll run down to, where is it? Launcher, and it's enabled with cache and data. So it gets 60 kilobytes of data, and it gets 28, almost 29 kilobytes of cache. And Print Spooler was at 0. So where does it pick that up? We'll run down, and is UpgradeSys affected by Print Spooler? In this case, it appears it was. So we'll run back up here. We'll quickly run down and shut off launcher. Clear it, stop. We'll quickly fly down. I don't want that. Come on. We'll quickly go down to upgrade system. Is 0. Launcher is 0. And where we'll go to Print Spooler. We'll disable it. Okay. We'll go back down to launcher. And it's populated with data. This time it only has 20.52 kilobytes. Before it was 28. So we're going to clear it. And we're going to run. I'm just curious to run down and see if stupid. Let's see. Upgrade system. It's 0. So when launcher is enabled, or when printer is enabled, or print spool is enabled or disabled, launcher is affected. So okay, so with upgrade system, I'm using auto starts to see what's going on with upgrade system, and we'll look at this application installed, and look at the bottom. You'll see the receiver com adups.fota.sysoper. Application removed is the same, photo.sysoper, and down here intent, Android intent action, photo operation is sysoper for photo operation receiver and priority, and it's also for update. And I haven't gone through the other ones, but upgrade system, it shows that. So you'll notice that upgrade system is being triggered by the radio on, and it's being triggered, here we have this application adups.fota.sysoper received, which is interesting because here at thehackernews.com, pre-installed backdoor on 700 million Android phones to China. So what happens is this company, CryptoWire, discovered an alleged backdoor hidden, and it's not alleged, it is a backdoor. First reported on by the New York Times on Tuesday. It's backdoor firmware software, so it cannot be removed, and it cannot be disabled, and it cannot be taken off. Developed by Chinese-based company Shanghai Adups Technology. So basically, you can send SMSs every 2 hours, collect and send logs, call logs, personal identifiable information, smartphone IMSI, IMEI identifiers, and on and on and on and on. It can update and remove apps. It can update the phone's firmware, and execute remote commands. Now, the problem with this is you cannot delete it, you cannot disable it, and you cannot get rid of it. And guess what it is? Here it is right here. What did I just show you? On update app, on upgradeSys. That's this right here. And it's engaged every time I turn my radio on. Now, this is troubling to me because I live in one sec. Okay, so this is very troubling to me because that is a definite backdoor. It's very similar to IAMT technology with Windows. It seems to me that there's this huge swing of systems, phones, and computers being purposely and intentionally designed with backdoor ways into the device. And the people buying these devices do not know about this. And there's all this talk about hackers being this problem, but I think the real problem is coming from the government and from corporations and from manufacturers. All of my computers were being accessed by these Anglicans. I live in a building that's majority owned by the Anglican Church. It's used to house more theological Bible college students, MTC more theological Bible college students. I've talked about this in lots of other videos. Um, they've been hacking and uh, um, attacking and exploiting our devices for no reason at all for over 3 years. I took all our laptops apart and removed the wireless and Bluetooth cards, and they were still, and AirPort on an old Apple, and they were still accessing the machines. And their attitude is one of extreme viciousness and maliciousness. They laugh about it, and they think it's funny. Now, there's a whole backstory to it as to why they're doing this. I think it's training, and I think I just caught them. And I think if it wasn't me they were doing it to, it would have been somebody else, because they own the building and they control the environment. Even if I do catch them, nobody's going to believe me and nobody's going to do anything to them. And that's exactly what happened. So anyways, these Anglicans have been hacking us since the whole time we've been here. Now this phone is a ZTE phone. I bought this phone. One sec. This phone is a ZTE phone, a ZTE zip by 5.1, and you'll notice that in that other video I showed you, Hacker News, or that other web page, ZTE and Huawei are one of the two companies that are using that application, that backdoor. That's this company here that makes this phone. This company's okay, and so this here is ZTE and Huawei. ZTE said, spokesperson for ZTE USA provided the Hacker News. We confirm that no ZTE devices in the US have ever had the ADAPS software cited in recent news reports installed on them, and will not. ZTE always makes security blah 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 blah. And I just showed you that this phone is a ZTE, and I bought it from in Australia. And I bought this phone in Australia, and that's a Western country, and this phone has that application on it. Not only that, but the Anglicans here knew about it, because the Anglicans here have been executing that application on a daily basis, and it's been being used on a daily basis and acting on my phone. I just showed you it engages and with upgrade system. Also, I think that they're also able, the Anglicans are also able to hide storage space, and then they protect it with DRM. And when it's protected with DRM, they store my behavior on that storage space. So they'll move websites I have visited, certain activities, they'll log it, and then they'll move that data to a DRM protected space. And then when they get an opportunity, or when it's beneficial for them, or when they have the time or whatever, they just bounce it off my phone onto their system, and then they go through the logs that way, or they go through the data that way, and I never know because it's protected by DRM. And many times my phone, I'll stop, like today, I stopped it. It had 0 bytes of data, and then I started it again, and 4 megabytes of data appeared. So I think what they do is they access the DRM, and then they move it to their system, and then all of a sudden data appears out of nowhere. But I think that they're using this this backdoor and knowingly, they know that it's there, and they're utilizing it intentionally. This phone, this ZTE, I bought from Woolworths for 45 bucks. And that's a big, huge company chain. And I know that one of the people in Woolworths has a relationship with the Anglicans, because the Woolworths store and the Kohl's store gives these MTC students every week. They get food. They get free food from a delivery comes here. A car comes here with bags of bread and food for the Anglican students. So I know there's a relationship between Woolworths, Kohl's, and the Anglican Church. So the Anglican Church, I think, knows about this, and I think that members of the Anglican Church actively use these backdoors to go into people's phones and monitor them. I also know that one of the students here, I'd love to name the names, but there's no point, and they'll probably just put a gag on me. Just know that there's so many people, so many of these students are involved in these criminal activities, you wouldn't believe it. I know at least 15 are engaged in these computer crimes. So one of the people that was engaged in these computer crimes lived 30 meters away, and he went to the same church as Premier Mike Baird. And when I think that they discussed these things, and I think that previous Premier Mike Baird, he got a job at a big bank now, but previously I think he was involved with the student that was actively engaged in hacking our computers, and I think they traded information, and I think that the politicians here in Australia know exactly what's going on, and they trade information, and I think they create policies and create laws and then test them. This is a private, basically this is a controlled environment. Basically this building is controlled and run by the Anglican Church. Nobody opposes them, and if you do oppose them like I've done, they make your life miserable, and they harass you, and they frustrate you until you leave, and that's the intention. So I think that the Anglican Church knows about these backdoors, and I think that they utilize them. I think the Australian government knows about these backdoors, and I think they utilize them. ZTE in that news or in that news article by Hacker News claimed that no United States devices had this on them, and yet here in Australia, it's right on this phone that I'm using, and I just showed you. So I think that Australia is used as a testing bed. And if they can get away with it here, they move it over to the United States. Remember a long time ago there was that sheep that they cloned here? I was a kid, and I remember thinking, holy cow, how did they get away with that? Well, because of Australia. Nobody questions, nobody asks. If anybody knows about anything, or if anybody says anything, they silence them so quick because it's so corrupt. The cops are corrupt, the churches are corrupt, the government is corrupt. They get away with everything here. And nobody really cares because it's in the butt of the world, right? It's on the bottom of the world. It's not America. It's not England. Nobody's watching it, and nobody cares. And if you are watching, you get in trouble, and you're silenced pretty quick. So I think they're doing these kind of social experiments here to see what they can get away with, to see what kind of monitoring they can get away with, to see what they can do with devices, to see how far they can take it before the public pushes back, if they push back at all. I know for a fact that all of these church people laugh their asses off me and don't believe me that I'm saying these things, and don't believe me that my phone and computers have been hacked continuously for 3 years. And yet every single day I see evidence of hacking and remote administration that is being done by the Anglicans and their company. So it's not just the Anglican students that are doing it, because there's a couple other people in this building that I think are involved as well. After the last rotation, when new people came in, a new guy moved in, a Chinese fellow from Canberra. And Canberra is the state capital. Canberra is the capital, so that's where all the politicians are. So this new guy showed up, and basically he doesn't have a job or anything. He just sits in his house all day. He's an Asian guy. I think he's really clever, and I don't know what he does, but he basically just pops his head out at once in a while. And I have no idea what he's doing, so I mean, he could be involved. And I know that there's another guy that lives here as well, a non-Anglican, that has a relationship with the Anglican community and has a relationship with the More Theological Bible College property manager. This guy that I'm speaking of, this said person, has been here for over 10 years. So he's been here for a long time, and I think he does dirt on the side for the Anglicans, and I think he likes to do it. He's not a nice person, I don't think a very admirable person at all, and I don't think he would mind getting his hands dirty doing dirt to get a kickback from the Anglican Church. So I think that there are several people that are third parties. There's people in the building behind us. I think the Anglicans own units back there. So there's a lot of people involved in this, and there's a lot of people washing the dirt off each other's hands. And the fact of the matter is, the important thing to note is that upgrade system and launcher are being used. They're being triggered by, I have no idea how many, but at least by the radio function, and that UpgradeSys has a sub application in it, and that is that adups.fota backdoor. That one that ZTE spokesperson claims that there is nothing in the United States, but here in Australia There is. So I think what they're doing, like I said, they're testing these backdoor methods, and I think these methods are on a lot of different devices, not just the ZTE phone, but also other phones and also computers. There's the IAMT attack in Windows, where you can have remote administration of almost do anything you want to a computer, even when it's powered off. So uh, I think it's got to be plugged in, but even if it's powered off, you can access it remotely. So I think there's a backdoor way into computers. I think there's a backdoor way into phones, and I think that this is done intentionally and by design. And I think that they're rolling out these devices in mass. This phone was bought for 45 bucks, and hundreds were sold at Woolworths. They were sold out within a week, and then they went on sale again, or and then they got a whole new shipment and they were selling again. So I think that this is an intentional design. Another weird thing, I'll show you. One sec. One sec. Now this is my phone's filing system. I'm using Total Commander. Look at directory D. 1st of 1st, 1970 at 10. And if you look at all these files here in the root system are all 1970 at 10 o'clock, 1970. Now that's the epoch time. But I don't think that this phone should have that date. Here's another example here. Cache is 2010. And all the other systems are one here, etc. is 2016. This is when I bought the system, was in or this system was probably put on this phone on the 4th of 2016, because I can't remember. I bought the phone in shortly after that, 2016. But it's this 1970 date that troubles me, because on my other systems, it's the 1970 date that troubles me, because on my other systems, I noticed that when I moved here, very shortly after I moved here, less than a month, I noticed that when I inserted a USB stick, the dot directory changed to 1970. It changed to the same thing. January 1st, 1970, which is the Unix epoch time, just like that. So now that I see this phone, I think that this phone is being remote administered and controlled by their system. And I think that's that when they were connecting to my computer, even when I removed the wireless card and the Bluetooth card, the USB date was still showing 1970. After I removed the all the devices, the networking devices, they were still connecting to the machine, and the USB dot directory was still showing 1970. I think that they may have been connecting with like an Android system or an embedded system like this, or they may have been even using a phone to connect to it. I don't know. Or they may have been using a phone on a virtual system so that they can have deniability. So anyways, because I don't know the laws here in Australia, they may be allowed to use a phone to connect things, and there's no law against it. The point is that they were remote connecting to my computers, even after I removed the devices. Now I know it was a remote connection because one of the computers was small, and I started it up in a Faraday cage. When I started it up in a Faraday cage for the first time, I had 20 minutes where that USB stick showed today's date. The dot directory had the proper date, which should have been of the said date of starting that machine. Within 20 minutes, they realized what I had done, and like I said, they monitor all my activity and they know what I'm doing, and they fixed it. The next time I tried to start it in a Faraday cage, it didn't work. Now, when I went and talked to a guy one time, I was trying to find a system that didn't have wireless, and I was talking to this guy, and it turned out it was at a store, a J-Car electronics store, and I was trying to figure out a system that I could use that didn't have any wireless. And I was explaining to the person why I wanted this. I was explaining how they were remote connecting to my computers, and the USB was turning to January 1st, 1970. He was interested. He said he was an Anglican, but he grew up in an Anglican, but he had changed, and he had since then become like a LaVeyan Satanist. I think it's LaVeyan. a LaVeyan Satanist, but he's not with the Anglicans anymore. After I talked to him a week later, what happened was the behavior changed. The USB, when I plugged it in, had the date 1970. But now, when I wrote to the USB stick, but now, after I talked to that guy at JCAR and mentioned about the 1970 problem with the USB, after I wrote to the USB stick, the date changed to the correct date. So writing to the USB stick changed the date. Now that wasn't it like so previously. Previously, it was always January 1st, 1970. Writing to the USB stick did not change anything. So they're actively modifying and evolving their attack techniques. Once they get to the point where the USB stick is inserted and it has the correct date, and it doesn't show 1970, well, there's going to be no evidence that they're actively engaging in the system unless you can have like a direct memory access monitor. The point is that these Anglicans know my behavior. Either that Anglican or that JCAR guy, the guy who said he's a LaVeyan Satanist, either he talked to the Anglicans and alerted them to what I was saying, or somebody followed me on an hour-long trip away from here and went into the store and listened and heard what I said and then brought it back to them. So they followed me. How are they going to follow me unless they have a GPS on my car? Because I never brought my phone. Now, this is disturbing. So the fact of the matter is that after a week after I talked about it, after I talked about that USB problem, the behavior changed. And when I wrote to the USB, it was fixed. And I know for a fact that either that LaVeyan Satanist guy was lying and he was an Anglican and he went and repeated it and clued them into what I was saying, or somebody followed me to the JCAR store, which is an hour away, and the one I went to, and listened, stood behind me in whatever, because it's a public place, right, and listened to what I was saying and then repeated it and brought it back, and this happens all the time. So this is a serious warning about the Anglican Church and the people in it, especially about technological people. If you know anybody who's an Anglican and they've got a computer or a phone around you and they're interested in technology. Another thing too is that they keep everything secret. So they never come out and say, I'm an Anglican churchy, I go to the Anglican church, or I'm a Presbyterian or a Baptist. The guy that lived next to me, he was hacking my stuff too, and or he was cracking into our system and our devices, and he's a Baptist. So there's a couple groups that are affiliated with the Anglican Church, Presbyterians and Baptists here that I know of, and they're involved in all this too. So I think that what they do is they train the students, and then the students go off and work for the government. They can control the people, they control their thinking, and they're not going to turn against them, against the church, because they're basically owned by the church. What better group of people to control and have for spies and have for like a surveillance workforce than a bunch of brainwashed, easily controlled churchies. Now, the church people are never going to go against the church, because if they do, then they'll be excommunicated and they'll lose all their perks. They're not going to go. They're not an individual thinker, because their entire lives are based around the church and entire lives based around what they're doing. So they're probably monitoring and doing all this surveillance right from their churches, right from your neighborhood corner church. And I know for a fact that they've been doing it to me for 3 years. And I know for a fact that they had direct knowledge, because within 12 hours they were utilizing the upgrade system, because I disabled it right away, and they were utilizing it in the same way that I just showed you. And they've been changing my phone's behavior and monitoring my phone's activity. I'm certain of it. So I think that the government of Australia knows about this. I think maybe not all of it, but there are agents and actors within the government that do. Like, for example, I think that Premier Mike Baird knew. I think that Premier Mike Baird knew because he knew the guy that was going to school here. The guy that was going to school here, he still is. He moved to the other building when I got vocally about all this stuff. He moved to the building on Georges River Road. He used to live here at 126 Croydon, but he moved over there across the field there, over that way. So anyways, the he used to be a student minister at the same church that Premier Mike Barrett went to. So I think this is like a systematized program. I think that they do experiments and they do tests to see how far they can go, and then they take the information back to the politicians, like Premier Mike Barrett, and he takes it to the legislation, and then they pass laws that allow them to do these certain behaviors. They test to see if it works, monitoring and surveilling, all in the name of national security. I'm not a security threat, but they make you into a security threat. They make you into a monster. They make you into an enemy because they want to practice. And then they target. They can't target their friends. What are they going to target each other? Nah. Are they going to target the other church? Nah. Are they going to target someone who knows what they're doing is connected? A rich kid? Nah. So they target somebody, and in order to do that, they got to do a background check. So they do a background check, and then they target you. So I think they did background checks on us as well, and then targeted us. So now I realize that this is a really ugly situation. And getting back to legislation, they create legislation that allows them to enact these behaviors and allows them to engage in these activities, which is surveillance and device monitoring. And then they push the legislation and they muddy the waters so that nobody really knows what's device. And the government, a year back or so, I heard the government on ABC radio talking that they wanted to define what a device was, define what a network was, define what a computer was. So once they define all these items, these devices, they can create laws to manipulate those devices so that they can get away with it. Here in Australia, nobody has any rights, nobody has any freedoms. Everything's basically, I don't believe anybody has any rights. I believe they just basically do what they want, and they do whatever they can get away with, the Australian government. And I think that the church um, promotes this, and they enable it. And I think that the Anglican Church is very powerful, and these people in the Anglican Church have never said anything. A little while ago, there was a story in the news about a girl who got raped. She went to a house party. She was 15 years old, and it was an Anglican private student that raped her. A private school, Cranbrook, an Anglican student at a private school, an Anglican denomination, Cranbrook School was the name of the school, Cranbrook, private school. He raped this girl at a house party. She was passed out, and his friend videoed it. Now, nothing has happened. Nothing will likely happen to this guy. He got sent away to his family out of state. So now the judge said, well, he doesn't have to come to court because he's out of state, because he's living with family out of state, so he doesn't have to come to court. So what they'll probably do is they'll probably destroy all the data and destroy all the evidence, and then they'll say in court to the people that saw the video, because several people, up to 50, I think, numerous people saw this on a private Facebook page. Many people saw this video of this girl getting raped. And one on my Twitter page, CJ Bosley, my Twitter, tax-free cult, I talk about it. And many people saw the video. So what they'll do is they'll destroy all the data, and then down the road, using these techniques that I'm talking about, data corruption and remote device access, they'll destroy the data. There'll be no evidence. The data will be gone. And then in the law case, they'll say, well, are you sure you remember who it was? Do you remember seeing the person? And then they'll line up a whole bunch of people that look similar, and then they'll find fault in the people in the students' memories that saw the video, and then the innocent girl that got raped when she was passed out, when she was unconscious, no justice will be served, and this little rich kid bastard, he'll get away with it, and he'll probably do it again. And these Anglicans do this all the time. They've accessed our machine, many machines. They've destroyed data and left no proof. Our firewall doesn't catch them. They did this when I turned my firewall off. They would access our machines and access our data and control and delete data, change NTFS file systems from read write to write only so that I couldn't write to external USBs, etc., 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 on and on and on. These people are nasty and vicious, and they're cruel. I think they're the friggin' Antichrist, as a matter of fact. They group themselves together, and they're like a mob. Just like that rapist, that Anglican rapist, and his friend videotaped it. They're like a mob. They're completely immoral. They're amoral. They don't even think morality belongs to them. They have a framework of ethics, and they just go along with whatever they want. They do whatever they want. I think this is a monster. I think this is a monster, and I think that it has to be stopped. So this ZTE phone And another example, the CET phone has a backdoor in it. It's in Australia, and I think that likely one day they're probably doing it in America already, but something has to be done about this. It's horrible and it's completely wrong. It's intentional by design, backdoor entry into computers and cell phones. This is by design. This is intentional, and this is being exploited by people who know about it. So, warning, Anglican Church, Church of England, pretty evil group of people. And I hope that something is done about these devices so that one day we'll be able to have devices that are actually private.